Are you tired of hitting poor shots and shooting high scores? Wouldn't it be nice to make solid, consistent contact more often? Hit more fairways off the tee and more greens with your approach shots. Lower your 3 putts per round and shoot lower scores consistently. Lessons with Bernard Sheridan at Impact Zone Golf at Tiburon Golf Club in Naples is the fastest way to lower your scores and start making the game fun again. Call 239-236-5536 and schedule your lesson today. Remember, if you improve your impact, you improve your game. It's that simple.
Welcome to Breaking Par with Bernard Sheridan, the golf podcast that interviews the best and brightest minds in the golf industry. Now, here's your host, Bernard Sheridan.
Dan, welcome to Breaking Par. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Hey, Bernard. Thanks for getting hold of me. This is something I've been looking forward to, and can't wait to see how it goes.
Yeah, so just a little tidbit of information for our listeners out there. We recorded this show. We did a video and recorded the show together about a month ago, and unfortunately, somehow the show got lost. So here we are. We're doing it again, so that the listeners can all hear it. And it was such great information that I'm really glad that you had the opportunity to allow me to interview you once again. And then hopefully it'll be even better than the first time.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's the thing. Maybe I'll be a little more comfortable. Not that I'm uncomfortable, but yeah, it should go well. I'm looking forward to it.
So tell us a little bit about how you first got involved in what you're doing, and which is doing custom fitting, and also, to go even deeper, things that are actually design in fitting that nobody else has ever done, that is your own thing.
Yeah, my own thoughts and methods, and I do vary a little bit from where the normal methods of fittings are. Like I guess it goes back to when I was taking my master's program down at Ralph Maltby's institute. And, basically I came home with a fitting chart that they said, basically, go build this set of clubs. The fit should be just bang on for you, and Ralph, a wonderful, contributor to the golf world, that's for sure. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to build my set. So I built the set to the specs that they gave me. And I didn't find that the fit still felt right. Like all my life, I felt like my short irons were too short and my long irons were too long. And it just puzzled me as to why this continued to be. So after I built the set, lo and behold, it still had that same scenario. So my background is I'm a metrologist by trade, and a metrologist is the art of measurement. So I've done high-level measurement work all my life. And I thought, well, we've got to be able to apply this to the golf club and systems of fitting and length lie combinations. So I sat down and started studying it on my CAD station, and lo and behold, the math wasn't adding up with the methods that have been used for, the last 50, 60, 70 years. The math just wasn't right. So started studying different versions of things like 3/8 of an inch increment, and and those sort of brought me closer, but it still didn't feel 100%. There was still something missing. So that's when I really sat down and dug into the CAD station and the math background to it. So what I ended up with was my fitting system that I've called True Length Technology, and it is a mathematically perfect model for every golfer, regardless of your size. So we've had the luxury of fitting 7-foot tall golfers where they no longer look like they've stolen some little kid's clubs. We get them standing tall, which is important. Those guys are big athletes. And if you look at most of them, like you look at any football player that plays golf, He looks like he's got a little wee club in his hand, and it just doesn't suit him right for his stature. And the opposite side of it is you put a little petite woman into a -1 set of golf clubs, and they still look way too long. She's choking down 1.5 inches, 2 inches, and the math just wasn't right there either. So I basically developed True Length technology where we can fit anybody and everybody on the planet where they all will stand athletic. So in my case, at 5'10", my wedges are now a little bit longer than they used to be. They're about 36.55 inches long. And my short irons, sorry.
That's okay.
My short irons are, as I said, a little bit longer than normal. And my long irons are actually about 3/4 of an inch shorter than they used to be. So, that combination allows me to now play one athletic address position and not have to make any form of adjustment whatsoever. So the lie angle of my clubs now looks correct regardless if it's the long club or the short club, and my athletic stature looks correct regardless of that. So everything seems to fit very well now, and that was back, I guess, in about 2005. So after that, I decided I needed to find a way to get that out to club makers. So I joined up with the AGCP out of Georgia, the Association of Golf Club Fitting Professionals. And these guys are all devoted very much to their trade. But again, every one of them that I talked to experienced the same sort of thing. So it's not just something that I was curious about. It's been a phenomenon that's been out there for ages. So after I introduced it at the PCS show in Louisville, Kentucky, I actually met with Tom Wishon. And Tom is one of the very high-level club fitters that exists on the component side. And just the look on his face when he saw me set up a set of clubs with a 4-iron, a 7-iron, and a pitching wedge, where every club ends at the exact same hand address position, but yet still has varying lengths. But it just eliminated that too long of long club, too short of short club. And the expression on his face just gave it all away that, wow, we're on to something here. Like he was astonished by what he had seen. So I guess that was basic introduction of it. And then after that, we started working with club fitters at the AGCP. I started certifying guys down there using my methods. These guys now build with, True Length technology math models, which is all like it's an Excel program now. So if you want to alter something, let's say you wanted to make the club a little shorter, well, that's easy to do in the Excel program. You just make the alteration. It corrects the lie angle along with it. So the math always remains perfect, regardless of the size of the golfer, whether or not they want to play some reduced lengths or anything like this. It all gets covered in the math. So I've had great success with it.
So how different is this from standard fitting? In like you said that, the short iron is a little bit longer, the long iron is a little bit shorter. So how much of a difference is there from just a standard fitting? And, well, let's get to that first, and then I'll ask the next question.
Okay, well, I guess there's two ways of looking at it. See, my scenario of long irons being too long, short irons being too short, that applies to somebody at my height, roughly 5'10". If you're a 5'5" player, chances are all your short irons are perfect for you, but your mid and long irons are too long. So True Length addresses that. The 6'4" guy, chances are he hits a 3-iron very well, but by the time he gets to his 7, he's starting to squat. By the time he gets to his wedges, he just looks horribly uncomfortable. So True Length addresses that. So it's an overall range check. So basically, I have about 3 inches of total length separation between my long and my short irons. That's basically a 3-iron down to a wedge kind of thing. And a standard OEM set could have 4.5 inches between a 3-iron and, let's say, a lob wedge, because there's a lot of guys that still make their wedges and 1/2 inch shorter each wedge too. So you can end up with a total range of, from 35 to 39.5 or even 40 inches in your irons. Well, the short irons you're dipping, you're playing short. Your long irons you're having to choke down because they're simply too long. Where if you address it through the math model and we do the fitting process correctly, you're going to stand in one singular athletic adjust position and never ever have to change that regardless of what club I put in your hands. That's the hugest benefit that I see, because you only have one powerful position where you have one powerful turn, and if you're squatting or if your spine tilt's no longer at 30 degrees and you're over at 45, you're no longer swinging with power. So you're making some form of compensation. And that compensation actually shows up in your ball flight too, like toe up, toe down kind of thing. Those scenarios lead to the lefts and the rights of golf shots, And everything that I do is about trying to get you to be down the middle of the fairway. So short irons now no longer having to dip. You get pure backspin out of it, pure stopping power, and, accuracy has never been better. Long irons, you're no longer having that toe upright too far where you're hitting shots thin, pulling to the left. Another good example of that is hybrids. They're all built a little bit upright and a little bit too long. So almost everybody complains that I miss the green to the left with my hybrids. Well, that's a length lie issue. So that all gets addressed by the math model as well.
That's very interesting. So with these, when you're measuring for different players, different heights players, that'll definitely change the total length of all the clubs, correct? So
yeah,
just in standard fitting, where it might be like, let's say, they're a half inch over, so then they make all the clubs a half inch over, and then of course there are certain increments that they're normally set at. So is it very similar in the true length technology?
Well, see, what you're just describing is, okay, so at a plus half inch, we're talking about, maybe a 6 foot tall player.
Right.
And what happens there is now, because he got that done because his wedges were simply too short. So by raising a half an inch, they still may be too short for him, but his long irons now may be too long. His 7-iron probably is going to be bang on. So it's the math relationship of length versus lie. So to simplify it, if you picture a hypotenuse of a triangle, and if as the lie angle gets flatter, the shaft gets longer. As the lie angle gets more upright, the shaft gets shorter. But nowhere in there is a common increment of 1/2 inch. So for every degree of lie angle change, the half-inch increment is simply mathematically incorrect. So that was the simplest form of how I addressed it. And then to be able to fit the tall players and the short players, we had to come up with different, what I call TLT series models. So a series 15 is for a very tall player. He's going to have wedges that could be up to 39 inches. Well, this fella needs that because he could be a 6'8", 6'9" fella with a 42-inch wrist measurement.
Sure.
So it's the only way we can get him to stand athletic. So people will look at you and go, well, you can't play a 39-inch wedge. Well, if you're a 6'8" man, chances are you can. And you will be so comfortable. Like I've had guys come to me and go, I'm going to quit golf because I just can't get comfortable with my short clubs. So I fit them into one of my long series, and it starts out with a simple wrist to floor, height measurements, things like this. But even the size of your chest and the width of your shoulders all play into the math. So my fitting system, basically, I've got 4 irons at 58 degrees of lie, 7 irons at 61 degrees of lie, and pitching wedges at 64 in 16 different length series. So out of that, you've got your giants of men, your petite little women. They'll be in maybe a series 0, where the giant of a man may play a series 12 or 13. So it's still all about getting you to stand athletically correct, regardless of your size. The plus half-inch model still has all those length lie errors at one or the other end of that spectrum. So that's where the long irons too long, short irons too short can apply, even if you start doing plus half inch, plus 1 inch, minus a half inch, minus 1 inch. There's still that incorrectness that lives within the set. So I had to go away from that and simply do a CAD modeled length lie fitting system. So now basically you set up, and all you do is point at target, shoot at target. If you're a good golfer, yeah, you still have the ability to work the ball left, work the ball right. We're golfers. We got to be able to do that. But I want the bulk of my shots from a correct stance, from an athletic stance, to be at target. And then you simply may have to relearn your distances because yardages may change. Your club head speed may go up with a longer club, and so all that does need to be addressed, and it does during the fitting. We basically need to understand what's going to get you standing athletic regardless of your size.
Sure. And if you're in your best athletic posture, then you're going to be able to create the best swing and create the best ground force.
Absolutely, without having to compensate somewhere in the club head. So a long player, a tall player, a lot of times you'll see them choking down where they've got the grip in the palm of their hand because it's simply too short. So they're trying to compensate to get that club to feel longer. A shorter player, you look at them with their hybrids, they're going to be choking down 2 inches on that to try and get that toe into a position that actually looks correct. Well, the math model looks after all of that stuff. So that's the very uniqueness that what my system does that's very different from everybody else's. But at this point now, I've got club makers in 18 countries that are using my system, and all of them are reporting back such great success. 5 of those fitters are listed on Golf Digest Top 100 Club Fitters. So we've got some very high-end fitters that have recognized this need to have correct lengths and lies developed. And now that they're using and fitting to True Length technology, all of their players are enjoying that benefit as well. And it's showing up by the honor of being listed on the Top 100 Club Fitters page.
Now, how does this affect swing weights? And is there any differences in that due to the fact of the way that the technology is laid out? Is it easier to make them consistent swing weights across the board, or is there more science to it?
Well, see, if you're building for a 5'10" kind of character like myself, chances are you could stick with traditional swing weights. Now, through my study with Tom Wishon, he's a very big pusher of MOI matching golf clubs. And what that is, it's a progressive swing weight. So let's say your 4 iron's at a D2, your 5 iron would be at a D2.4, your 6 iron a D2.8. So it's a progressive swing weight. And actually, True Length technology fits very well to that math model. So I basically build every club to an MOI theory based on the True Length technology lengths. Now, if you're building a very short set, you're going to end up with lighter swing weights. But you're dealing with more of a petite person.
Right.
So that person doesn't mind a lighter swing weight. If you put a D2 swing weight in a little 105-pound framed woman, she's going to find that club heavy.
Yeah.
That's not what we want. The opposite end of the spectrum, if I put a D8 or a D9 swing weight into a 6'4" man, he couldn't care less that the thing is 14 grams heavier than it used to be. You got to realize what a gram is, and we're not talking much weight at all. And those guys, swinging a hammer, they swing a 20-ounce hammer. I struggle with that. I have to swing a 16-ounce hammer. A petite little woman has to swing a 12-ounce hammer. So the relationship still lives, but the report back that I get from all of my tall players with heavier swing weights is they do not mind it one little bit. Now, you do have to address the flex, too, because if you're starting to build longer clubs, and I'm talking a little bit excessively long, so let's say something that's up around 2 inches longer than normal.
Sure. Well,
that head weight's going to be no longer feeling light at all because head weights are designed for the masses, And so it is going to be a heavier swing weight, which is going to soften the flex. So you may, if that guy's typically been playing an R flex, you may have to actually bump him up to an X flex because it is going to soften because of the head weight, and it is going to soften because of the additional length. So as a club maker, that's my end of the business to understand that I'm fitting you into the right shaft. So I'm not going to give you a whippy club where you still are a fairly aggressive player. So as the club maker and club builder, I need to understand those scenarios and address them during the build. So it does happen, but big players don't mind heavier clubs. Little players certainly don't want heavy clubs, and just the simple math of it works out where shorter clubs end up being lighter. And if you look at, a lady set, they will have lighter swing weights. A big tall man set, they will have heavier swing weights. So I've never had that become an issue to me. So it just continues to prove out the theories that, the math model is working. And just those tall players just really enjoy the difference of being able to stand athletic with a wedge in their hand and not have to be crouched, excessive spine tilt, all these little things that they've done their entire career. So the math does still work regardless of your size.
Yeah, because now they're able to set up naturally and not have to make compensations for the clubs that they're playing.
Exactly. And that's why I get the extreme-sized golfers coming to me all the time. Like, probably my last 5 fits have all been big, tall men. And because they've been reading about, what true length technology will do for a guy like that. So they've never been able, they've probably bought 6 sets of clubs out of the local OEM store and still continue to find that problem of clubs too short. Okay, my 4-iron fits me perfectly. My wedges, I crouch, I bend over too far, I just can't get comfortable. The math model will address that for the long, the mid, and the short irons, keeping you athletic all day long. Now you've got your powerful turn, your powerful swing, able to release the club properly and get proper dynamics of the shaft bending down the club head, so you get, basically directly straight shots if you've executed that swing correctly.
Now, what do you think about this single length technology, and what's your take on that? I mean, I know that that's a new thing. They're starting to come out with that now. Bryson DeChambeau uses it, and I think I just saw that one of the manufacturers are going to start to create clubs in that realm. So what do you think about that, and do you think that could be a good thing or a not so good thing?
What my findings is for myself personally, when I try to set up with a 36.5-inch 4-iron, it just doesn't feel natural. Now, what you got to understand about a single length set is every one of their lie angles are the same, the head weights are the same, and the shaft lengths are the same. And those shaft lengths will typically end up at around an 8 or a 9-iron length. Okay. So if you're a big, tall player, a 36.5-inch length isn't going to work. So fitting still applies to these clubs. Now, what happens is I've got to get that tall player, maybe playing a 37.5 or 38-inch single-length club. What happens with that now is the ball flight becomes extremely high. So there is some negative sides to it. It still has the concept of fitting more people accurately because the half-inch versus the half-degree lie angle math is incorrect. So for those guys to play single-length clubs, yes, you will find that you will probably get more consistent. Where you have to decide is, can I play a long iron that's normally my 9-iron length? And as a traditionalist, I have a little bit of a hard time with that. Now, the neat part of it is single length will put you into one singular address position. True length technology will put you into one singular address position as well. So for the guys that can't seem to get comfortable with that 36.5-inch 4-iron, I really think true length technology is the better choice. You still get to play longer long irons, shorter short irons, but the singular address position is that common denominator. You still remain athletic, 30-degree spine tilt, slight knee bend, everything remains there. So single length, I think, has its place. And you're right, there's probably 3 or 4 manufacturers now that do it. There's a couple of component guys that I do work with, and I've built 4 or 5 of the single length sets this year. I believe Cobra has come out with one.
Yeah.
The thing you have to watch, though, is to make sure that the loft increment change, because now you're swinging every club at the same swing speed too. So if the lofts are only 3 degrees difference to each other, you're going to have compressed yardages for distance. That can be a bit of a problem. The one guy that I believe has addressed that the most is Tom Wishon and his Sterling irons. He's put the 4, 5, 6, and 7 irons into more of a hot-faced design and keeping 4 degrees of loft separation. And the findings is we are getting the 10 yards, 11 yards, 12 yards of separation per club. So he has addressed it properly. That's why I do sell more Sterlings than I do anything else. But they are a premium club head and will come with a more premium price tag, but it's not something that's out of, it doesn't make it an extreme price tag by any means. The biggest part that contributes to the cost of golf clubs is the shaft. Like I've got shafts here that are as little as $7 a shaft, and I've got shafts here that are over $400 a shaft. So, you can spend an extraordinary amount of money getting your set, and yes, you're getting a better set by moving up in quality, but the whole thing is the math still needs to be correct. So fitting for single length still has to happen. The people that just simply walk into the OEM store and say, I want to play single length, and they pull the box out of the back and hand it to you, is still going to have lie angle errors, loft errors. The lengths are all going to be the same, but unless they've been dialed in by a club maker, there is going to still be errors that live in those club heads. No set leaves my shop without me first checking and certifying that every loft and lie is where I want it to be, as well as length. So because you're buying single length doesn't really simplify the fitting process. It may simplify your swing over the OEM standards. It does not simplify your swing over a TLT standard. So if you're a traditionalist and you still want to play varying lengths clubs, then TLT would be your superior way to go. Well over the OEM lengths and lies, because there's just too much error that lives in the math. Like if you go and pulled up a spec sheet of 3 different OEM clubs, you'd begin to notice that there's different lengths, different lies, and the math just simply isn't right. So those sets can be corrected and fit to the math model, and probably 50% of my business is doing retrofits to guys that have recognized that the lengths and lies are not correct throughout their brand new set of golf clubs. So they bring them to me. We correct the lies by bending the head. We correct the lengths by either shortening or extending them. And if you have to look at the swing weight, we address that through, various means of adding or, removing weight is a little bit more difficult. So you've got to weigh all these scenarios as to your customer and their budget as to what level of correction they're wanting to do. But so far, I've had huge success. And I've been doing true length technology fittings now for over 12 years. So it's not something new, but I've got a very sound customer base that basically nobody has come back and said, no, the fit isn't right. The main feedback is I really enjoy one athletic address position and remaining there regardless of the club. So we see improved directional control, improved fat and thin hits, because every club is basically sitting with the same amount of toe up at address. And during the dynamics of the swing, that gets corrected. So, it really has been a very good success story for me.
So in this, I'm sorry, in the realm of, we talked about swing weights and we talked about lengths and flexes. So when you were saying that when clubs go out, and what I've noticed too is with standard manufacturers, or when I see students come in, and we look at their clubs and we look at the flexes of their clubs, I see a great discrepancy in what the actual flex of the shaft is and what it says the shaft is. Now, do you see that a lot when clients come in and let's say, here's my set, and I want to have adjustments made to this set, and when you look at those flexes, are they across the board inconsistent?
Yeah, like that is an industry-wide problem. Part of the problem, too, is there is no industry standard. So one fella's R-flex is not the same cycles per minute as the next group's cycles per minute. So, you know, if you just look at your golf club and says, well, I play an R-flex shaft, well, chances are, no, you don't. And especially if you've got 2 or 3 different shaft manufacturers in there, then I can almost guarantee that you don't play that, what I want to call a regular flex. Like the flex designation is something that really should be corrected and turned into, you know, maybe just a cycles per minute. But then you've got to consider the length when you're talking about cycles per minute. So there is no real easy solution to that. But I guess what has happened with me is I've noticed that when I start working with a raw set of shafts, so I buy, let's say I'm going to reshaft a set of irons, and I'll buy 10 new shafts to go into this fellow's clubs, and I'll run them through, well, this is another one of my systems, true frequency technology. What this does is I incrementally check over the length of the shaft the different profiles that exist. So you'll clamp it in your frequency machine and do the full length, and you'll get a certain, you know, that's been the industry standard as to how you describe this shaft as an R-flex kind of thing.
Right.
And within 10 shafts, I could see 8, 9 cycles difference. Well, that's almost a full flex difference in 8 or 9 raw shafts. So that's what lives at the butt end. And then true frequency technology is you slowly reduce the beam length. So every 5 inches, you shorten that shaft and remeasure that shaft. And what I've found is when you get down into the tip section, I've seen 60 and 70 cycles difference.
Wow.
Like that's a gigantic difference of an extremely high ball flight versus an extremely low ball flight, almost to the point where one of them maybe you couldn't even hit, you know. So, and I've seen that in expensive shafts too. So it's not just an inexpensive shaft that has this problem living in it. You got to realize that graphite shafts are sheet wrapped and filament wound and all this. Well, what's happening is they're varying wall thicknesses. You got to remember it's still got some hand work done to it. So if you get a slightly thinner wall, it's going to cause the flex to happen a little faster. So there's all these little things that can happen in a manufacturing process that really can put a lot of variation into your set. Steel shafts, like, you know, you'll see different spines and things like this and different hard sides to shafts. Now, if they're randomly put into a set of clubs, like they are within the OEM factory, you will have varying flexes through your existing set. Like I've had guys to come to me and go, I love the feel of my 6-iron, can't stand the feel of my 7-iron. Well, if you profile that shaft, you're going to find, in all likelihood, a flex problem that lives somewhere inside of that shaft. You know, so with true frequency technology, what it does is it sorts shafts from the weakest flex to the stiffest flexed. And if you have an outlier where something, oh, I really don't like the shaft, that's going to be simply pulled, tossed to the side, and a new shaft's going to be put in until you get something that you feel is like a Class A or Class B set of shafts. Now you've got a great starting point. So when you go ahead and build that guy's clubs and set all these shafts in proper frequency sequence, now when he swings a 6 and a 7-iron, he goes, wow, they really do feel like the same club. And even though there's a little bit of a length differential, the MOI theories of, you know, slightly heavier progressive swing weights, that again makes each club feel more like the next. So as golf is certainly a feel game, you know, we've got to address these as club makers. So I've tried to address every angle that I can to make the best clubs that I can on the planet. And, you know, so far I've run very near 100% success, top to bottom, you know, whether you're building a simple set for a beginner or a high-end set for a highly skilled, you know, touring professional. It will make a difference.
There's proof there saying that it's not always the archer. It's sometimes the arrow. And,
yeah,
and if the arrow is a little bit off, the archer might be off too. But if that's in throughout that set that one of those arrows is off, then you know, they're going to wonder why every time they go to hit that club. why they're not getting the same results, or why they just love their 8-iron and they don't love whatever. And it might be due to, as you said, length, but also to frequency issues, where they feel comfortable in that length. With the true length technology that you're talking about, they would feel comfortable with length in general. So then it would be a frequency issue, but you don't allow anything to walk out the door unless those frequencies match across the board.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Like, and that's all done in the raw stage. So I know before, like, I'll spend 2.5, 3 hours on a set of shafts before I even put a saw blade to any of them. Most manufacturers, and that shaft lives in a bin where there's 100 other shafts sitting right beside it. You grab that 36.5-inch shaft, jam it into the head with a little epoxy, lean it in the corner until it's dry, and that club's ready to go.
Yep.
That doesn't live in my world, I can tell you that.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people, they don't realize that. So it is important for you, if you want to play well, to get fit by a professional like yourself, so that way, at least at the level that you're playing, your tools will be working properly the way they're supposed to, in incremental steps of length and in frequencies, and so that it feels pretty much the same across the board, as opposed to one feeling crazy or another. What I find too is that a lot of players, they'll blame it on their swing. They'll say that I love my driver and I love my 5-wood, but I hate my 3-wood, so I never take it out. And I think it's just the way I swing. I just can't swing a 3-wood right. And really, when we flex those things out, we're seeing that it's completely different. And it might be a lot softer flex, or it might be a lot stiffer in cycles. It might be, two flexes difference. But to them, they look at it, and they all say, like for a lot of the players that I'm dealing with are senior players, they all say A on them. They all say, like a senior flex. And it might be their driver's actually a ladies flex, their 3-wood is a stiff, and then their 5-wood is a senior flex. Yeah. And they're kind of okay with all, but the 3-wood is just isn't working for them. But they can't even tell the difference in feel, really. They just don't hit it well.
No, and that's where they come to me for things like that, so I can make sure that doesn't live within their set. So my whole goal is to reduce as many tolerances as I can, top to bottom, and flex is certainly one of them, and you're right. You get guys that'll, play 2 clubs side by side. I hit this one well, and I don't hit this one well. You're right. It could live in the flex. It could live in the lie. It could live in the length, or a combination of all 3. My goal is to have every club feel like the next one and perform like the next one. Every customer that comes in, I ask, what's your favorite club in this bag? Because I want to measure it first to see whether or not, after the fitting, if the model fits their favorite club, and almost always it does. But we always get guys, I love my 7-iron, and that's people that are 5'10" kind of range. And what happens is, because the wedges are too short, long irons, they hit them too thin, the toes a little bit too up. It's all these different little out-of-spec conditions that cause all this grief. Now, you did say something a moment ago that made me want to make sure I say this before I forget. After I've built a set of golf clubs for a customer, I typically tell them, after your first round, you're going to understand what I'm talking about, because you're conscious of standing taller with your wedges. You're conscious of not standing too tall with your long irons, or choking down on them and things like this. So I'll have players go play, and after the first round, I get what you're saying, Dan. It makes some sense. Third round, I'll often get people come and tell me, man, I could not hit a shot today. And what's happening there is you're going back to old muscle memory, old thoughts of, I've always played my wedge out of this position, and you're ending up toe up. And then by the 5th round, and I hear this all the time, I shot my best round ever. So it does take a good 300 golf balls or 5 rounds of golf to be able to get yourself accustomed and teach yourself to get out of those conditions that you were playing out of before.
Sure.
And I hear those stories all the time that now my wedges feel so much better. You know, they were just so short before, and I thought they were right. I bought a fitted set of clubs, and, you know, these short little irons didn't help me. So it will take a little bit of a time for the player to become acclimated to that new set. And I really do feel that once they've had a chance to play enough, they're all going to enjoy that new position and play out of that athletic stance all day long.
Now, if a player has an existing set and they want to come and get that set fit by you, do you have to totally redo the shafts? I mean, in other words, do you have to pull all the shafts and put new shafts in? Or can you, what you have there with the shafts that you have, can you adapt that set to your true length technology?
Yeah, the first thing you got to understand or think about or study, I guess, as a club maker is the shaft that's in that set relatively close flex-wise?
Right.
Okay, now we have talked about you could have a full flex difference live within that set, you know. So if the starting point is wrong, you're not going to end up with a great set at the end.
Sure.
So in those cases, yes, my recommendation is we need to reshaft these clubs.
Right.
And of course, you know, you get all sorts of budget people coming in, you know, I can't afford that. So in those cases, you've got to look and see what you can do to help correct that set. You know, so retrofits, yes, often you can save the existing set and do extensions in the short irons, reduce the length of the long irons. You do have to address sometimes swing weight issues, like if you shorten a club, the head does get lighter because it now does not match that new length. So if you're playing steel shafts, it's an easy fix. Pour some lead powder down in the shaft, cork it behind it, get that swing weight up to where you want. You know, but it all really does come back to what is the true flex of those shafts prior to the retrofit. You know, so there can be stopping points, but I would say the bulk is I have great success doing retrofits without having to do reshafts. Hopefully what they're playing with, the shafts are reasonable. You know, you will get the odd case where you've got a small petite player playing like a 130 gram dynamic gold shaft. That club's just simply too heavy for them, you know. So in those cases, yeah, this isn't the right fix. See, because as you shorten clubs, they get stiffer. As you lengthen clubs, they get softer. So you've got to understand all this relationship as a club maker and club repairman as to, you know, how far do we have to go? How much do we have to take off these clubs? And hopefully, you know, the set can be adapted so you can keep that fella into a reasonable budget. But sometimes you've got to deliver bad news that, I'm sorry, the set just isn't suitable for you. You know, they may be blade style heads and you're playing at a 30 handicap. Well, now you've got the head that's no longer right. You know, you need something with a varied game improvement, perimeter weighted, you know. So sometimes you do have to deliver some bad news to these folks and let them know. But at least I think the feedback I get is, well, I'm glad you were honest with me and just didn't go ahead and change my clubs.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and simply have the fit wrong, you know. So sometimes that bad news does turn into good news because now you've got a customer that says, okay, let's go ahead and build a new set, you know, and get the right design of head in there. Let's get the right weight of shaft because you got to realize shaft weights can vary from 130 grams down to 55 grams.
Right.
You know, so me as a fairly strong player, a 55 gram shaft won't cut it. But I'm also a fellow that deals with arthritis, so 130 gram shaft isn't going to cut it either. So I've got to find that happy median. But I've got to keep my flex right as well. You know, I can't play a loose tip shaft. I've got to play something fairly stiff. So, but it still has to have feel, you know, at a shaft weight that suits me. With dealing with arthritis in a couple of fingers, I play oversized grips. You know, so that also is part of the fitting process. You know, we've got to consider all of these scenarios when we're trying to retrofit or fit a player into their new set.
Well, I think it's just like, you know, and I try to explain to people that the importance of fitting and that if, you know, golf clubs are not cheap, let's face it. So, and neither is a nice suit. So if you're going to go out and get a nice suit, then you're going to have it fitted to you. You're just not going to usually buy it off the rack. And if you want to have a good set of clubs and you're a decent player, then you definitely want to have that set fitted to you and just not buy it off the rack, because it's just not going to be exactly right. And it's worth that little extra time and that little extra money, because now you're going to play a lot better. You're going to get a lot more enjoyment out of it. And it's going to be set for your particular swing, your setup, your attributes and strengths, that it's going to be able to get the most out of what you're paying for, as opposed to buying something off the rack. It's a little bit less. Now you're frustrated, you're not playing as well. You might spend the money somewhere else. It might be in lessons, or it might be in balls, for that matter, because you keep trying to hit balls, more balls and more balls, to try to find it. And no matter what, you're never going to find it with that set of clubs.
Yeah. See, I get asked all the time about lessons. Should I be taking lessons? And absolutely, there's a huge value in golf lessons, because you do want to learn the athleticism, the swing, the grip position. All this is gigantic in our sport, you know. But if the equipment doesn't fit, then what you're doing is you're learning to compensate. And, you know, the PGA pro that's working with you, trying to get you to get a more consistent swing, you know, if your clubs are ill fit, then you're going to have problems at one end or the other end of that set. Now, I think most lessons are often done with like a single club. So you go out, okay, let's get your 7-iron and let's go. And often, just like I said earlier, 7-irons fit a bunch of us very well.
Yeah.
So that lesson can develop very sound, and, you know, I hit this club really well. Then you go play your wedge and you're squatting. You go play your hybrid and you're having to stand too tall or choke down on it. The lesson isn't going to teach you any of that. So you do have to walk in with the proper equipment to get the full benefit of that lesson. You know, you walk in with a 30-year-old set, you know, chances are there's nothing about that set that's right. The PGA pro is going to try and develop a sound swing for you, and he's going to do you some good, that's for sure. But unless your set is correct top to bottom, then I feel that you're not getting what you should be getting out of that lesson session.
I agree. I totally agree. So with True Length Technology, you're in Canada, correct?
Yes, I'm about an hour east of Toronto.
So I'm sure there's people in Canada who listen to us and would want to come see you. What would be the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, like my website is danscustomgolfshop.com. Also, truelengthtechnology.com will direct you there as well. The best way to get hold of me is probably to go to my site and do the contact us button, send me an email. So now we've got some form of communication. Or the second best method, of course, is to phone me, 905-263-8510. So those would be the two ways to be able for local people to come see me. Now, if you are a club fitter or a club maker or a club builder and you're interested in TrueLink technology, there is a way that you can get my charts in Excel and become a registered TrueLink technology fitter and builder. There is a small fee that goes along with that, but that lives on my site as well under our technologies and down in, register as a club maker. And as I say, I've got club makers in 18 countries now that absolutely believe in everything that I do and follow my procedures, very tightly. And their customers have experienced that joy as well now, because all over the country now, or countries, we've got guys that can now build for you.
Now for folks who are, let's say, in the U.S. or outside of the U.S., not in Canada, like in Europe, we have a lot of listeners in the U.K. and in Ireland and Scotland. So what about those folks? Can they look up fitters that are in their area that do this?
Yeah, on my site is a Find a Fitter Near You. You basically put in your postal code or your town and country kind of thing, and it's a Google Maps driven thing, and it'll direct you to your location, and you just have to scroll out a little bit and find your local club maker that does build to the TrueLink technology model. Now, I don't know all these guys personally, what level they are at. That is all something you're going to have to discuss with that club maker.
Sure.
You know, and that's why I do get a lot of guys that do physically come to see me personally, you know, but in a case like that, that may not be possible. The second approach would be, is I have an online fitting program. For a small fee, you fill in a bunch of data that helps direct me to making a decision on what TLT series would fit you best. And then at the end of the program, I will send you a chart that says, okay, here's your new links, here's your new lies. Take them to your local club maker that maybe doesn't even know who Dan Connelly is, you know, but here is your new fitting chart. Get your clubs corrected to that, and you will enjoy the benefits of TrueLink technology as well. So there is lots of club makers that will, you know, work on your existing set, and, you know, I want them to this length and this lie. That all lives in your new chart that I'm going to supply. So there is several ways to be able to get fit properly to the TrueLink technology math model. Now, I did talk about the AGCP earlier, and one of the things that I did want to bring up is they awarded me the best new fitting idea back in 2007 with TrueLink technology. And basically every club maker that lived within that association built to my math model. You know, so there is a bunch of very qualified club makers that are out there, but you're right, you do have to compare on my Google map to find which one may be the local one for you. And, you know, there's probably 100 in the US, so there is quite a few club makers in some of the bigger areas that do build in my math model. So I do encourage you as a player to find these guys, and if not, go through my online program and you know, let's at least get your fitting chart correct so you can get your clubs corrected.
Now, if they have that fitting chart, can they actually send that to the manufacturer and have the manufacturer produce the clubs for them and those fittings?
I know some manufacturers will custom build to custom lengths and lies, but I certainly can't speak for any of them, you know, but I do believe that is something that exists, you know. I do know one of my customers, he was a devoted Titleist person, and he did send the chart off to them, and I believe they did do the build right for him.
Yeah, because I know
so
that Mizuno does that too. And,
yeah,
and there are a couple
I
other, I think the Callaway will do it also. Whereas if you're at a fitter, or you go to a Callaway, you know, you go to get fit for Callaway, and then they fit, and then they send the specs to Callaway, and then Callaway builds them.
Yeah, so I would certainly believe that most manufacturers would do that. If they offer any form of custom at all, then I would think that this wouldn't be a problem, you know. So, yes, I encourage everybody to at least go to my website, review what it is I do, and it will make sense to you once you've had a chance to study it a little bit, you know. And I know golfers are a very curious bunch. They need to understand this stuff.
Oh, they definitely are.
You know, and some of my stuff is a little bit technical, but I try to make sure that everybody will get the proper understanding through some diagrams. And you know, there is a page on my site called Understanding Length and Lie. I think that is one of the most valuable pages that everybody on the planet that golfs needs to review to understand what is wrong with existing equipment versus how you can get that equipment corrected to the TrueLink technology math model.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Dan, thanks so much for being a great guest, and thanks for taking the time out again with us. And I'm really pleased that you were here and able to speak with us again.
Oh, Bernard, it was my pleasure, and thank you for doing this again with me. I think it's a very important message that we do need to get out there. So hopefully your listeners are, you know, and I'm sure they are, they're a devoted bunch of golfers. So I do encourage them to look me up, and they're welcome to, you know, email me additional conversations, phone me. I'm open to all this. I'm a golfer that loves the game, and do encourage everybody to make sure you are fit properly. And the TrueLink technology really, I do believe, is the superior method of fitting.
That's great, Dan. Thanks a lot. Well, until we meet again, do your best to keep it in the short grass.
Thank you, sir.
All right, take care.
You've been listening to Breaking Par with your host, Bernard Sheridan. Follow us on Twitter @BreakingPar and on Facebook @Par Breakers Golf Academy. Until next week, try to keep it on the short grass.